Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Get in the Herd After Hours. I'm your host, Alex Bond. I am a administrative assistant and certified peer recovery specialist at the McShin Foundation. More importantly, I am a person in recovery from substance use disorder, which means that since September 23rd, 2019, I have not found the need to put any mood or mind altering substances in my body. Today, I am here with Lela and Randy. How are y'all doing, guys?
Yay! Great. So excited to be here.
I'm very excited to have you on. So, Lela, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, my name is Lela, and I'm in Montana. I'm also a McShin alum. I also am a person in long-term recovery. I haven't found the need to use mind-altering substance since October 12, 2016.
That is awesome.
So, yeah, I went to McShin and I came home and began my serious recovery journey out here. So.
Beautiful. Happy to have you on.
I'm sorry?
It's great to have you on, especially a McShin alum all the way from Montana.
Advocacy Project state lead for Montana. So.
No, that's awesome. Combo, McShin alum, person in long-term recovery, rap advocate. It is wonderful. I really appreciate you coming on. And Randy, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone who does not know?
Hey guys, hey everyone. Thanks for having me on, Alex. Nice to see my friend Lela. I don't, although I send a lot of people her way, I don't ever really talk to her a whole lot. So my name is Randy Anderson. I'm a person living in long-term recovery. And what that means to me is I haven't had to use any drugs, alcohol, or mood-altering substance since January 9th, 2005. And thanks, 15 years. Because of my recovery, I'm able to own a home, vote, have healthy relationships, be a responsible pet owner, vote, pay taxes, all those things that normal people do, right? So I'm also involved with the Recovery Advocacy Project. Currently the Region 5 lead. I'm on a little holding pattern, though. I kind of put most of my life on hold. I have a close family member that is her substance use disorder. She will not survive it, unfortunately, and I'm her legal guardian, and we're planning hospice care right now. So I did this tonight because, well, Todd asked, and then I found out Lela was going to be on. So I'm like, I got to get on now because no way will I miss that chance. So I'm just glad to be here. And I'm also, I think it's important to mention, I'm wearing my felon shirt tonight. I'm a formerly incarcerated person that was sentenced to 87 months in prison as a first-time nonviolent drug user with no criminal history. So this topic that we're going to talk about tonight is pretty important, I think. It's a good subject as well. So that's another reason why I'm kind of pretty excited about it. So thanks, Alex.
Absolutely. Happy to have you on again, buddy. It's awesome. You got a lot of energy and we'll turn it on tonight. So as Randy was kind of stepping into is we talked yesterday about the biggest news to the recovery community, in my personal opinion, is the passing of Oregon proposition, which will be turned into a law, number 110, which essentially, I don't personally like the word decriminalizes, but we will say defelonizes small amounts of drug use or drug possession throughout the state of Oregon. Lela, how impactful is this to the recovery community? Am I overstating the necessity of something like this?
I think that it's a very important. I think that Oregon is a good state to start this trial period, this Portugal model that they did, because it's a very homogeneous state. If we're going to test this, process out, Oregon's like I think the best place to do it. I think, but I also don't like decriminalize, because I think it's a misnomer. It decriminalizes it's not illegal, it's just decriminalized. So I don't like that term, but I think it's very important to move, destigmatize, our community. So.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And Johnny brings up a good point. Reclassification of, defelonization of. I think a lot of this stuff, it has a little less loaded context to it than decriminalize, because it is still a crime. It's just will be a $100 fine. And then there'll also be opportunities to be given treatment. Randy, what are your thoughts on this? Is this a big deal or what?
Oh, it's huge. So I've for a long time, I've said, like, I don't support, like, I'm going to be right up front, I don't support the legalization of any drug. I don't honestly, like, I just look at what we've done in this country traditionally with legalization of certain substances already. So let's look at alcohol. It's legal, right? And how good have we done as a country at managing that legal substance? I think we've done pretty horrible.
Poor.
Just right. Exactly. It's my opinion. I mean, I think there could have been, like, what could we have done differently? Whatever. It's the horses left the barn. Like, that's what we got to deal with. Let's look at how well we've done with tobacco, or I should say commercial use tobacco, because I think, Native American tobacco is a lot different than commercial use tobacco. We haven't managed that well. More people die every year in this country from alcohol or tobacco related disease than put everything else together. So we've done horrible managing that. And then let's look at the latest, like opioids. So another legally prescribed substance. How well have we done at managing that as a country, right? We've done horrible. Like, so I just look at what we've done traditionally. So I think when we go too far in that legalization route, and I'm going to call it commercialization oftentimes, because the people that profit are big industry, right? It's not people that are looking for reparations, or their communities have been disproportionately impacted by whatever the war on drugs and that. This is what, if we look at who's traditionally getting rich off of these things, it's still like old white guys, right? I mean, let's just say it. So, but I think this is huge. Like, people should not be locked up for possessing any drug of a reasonable amount. Like, what is of a personal use amount, right? They should be, if it's, if someone we know that 90% or a little less than that, people recreationally, I hate that word, because I don't think I play tennis recreationally and I swim recreational. I don't use drugs recreationally, but that's the word we've chosen in our society. But I think people have fun with substances that don't ever go on to have problems, right? And those, we shouldn't be locking up those people and giving them criminal records, and because we know the collateral consequences to that is, like, my 3 felonies, like, I still face barriers every day, even as an educated white man, that other people don't face, which is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So it's huge. Like, let's don't lock up people up for this. And then people that do have a substance use problem, and they're maybe not a full-blown disorder, like, maybe we can intervene at the right time in their life and change the trajectory of their life, right? So this decriminalization or reclassification, whatever term you like to use, like, is an opportunity. And I love that, again, like Lela said, Oregon is a great state to do this. And it's like that trial period, or we like to, we always like to do things in a probationary period and then see the data. And then how can we do this? So I think this is a good, like, I support it. I think it's a great idea.
No, I totally agree. And Lela, if you could, looks like Christine was wondering if either of y'all could speak a bit more on the commercialization of drugs to increase the wealth of generally old white men. I mean, it is definitely a 1% profit off of, even the commercialization of stuff like Suboxone. And so, they give you the drug and then they give you the solution, and are both, profiting off of it. Could you kind of speak on that a little bit?
Well, I know Kristen a little bit. I've watched many of her web not podcasts, but, like, she does a lot of presentations, and she's a huge social justice reform advocate that I know about her, and has always fight for the rights of people disproportionately impacted by these systems, people of color, indigenous people, Latino people, things like that. So thank you, Kristen, for that question. But if we look at where the money goes, even let's say marijuana. So let's pick that. If we look at some of the richest people in our country are not. It's not the people of color that are getting rich off of the commercialization of marijuana. It's white people again. It's rich old white guys that own big corporations and have fancy houses and Bill Gates types people. And I think that's where a lot of people don't understand, like how I think there's a way though we can do that. Like in Minnesota, eventually I know marijuana is going to be and I never like to use the word legal because I don't think any drug, even when they say legalized, is legal, because if you go over a certain threshold, it then becomes a crime, right? So realistically, no drug is completely legal, right? Or no substance. Even alcohol, like you can get criminalized for alcohol, right? Because you drive under the influence and things like that. So just throwing that out there. But I just think that how can we do better? Like how can we make sure that the same top, the 2% is not still the ones getting rich from all of these, the legalization or the commercialization of these drugs, right? So that's what I say to that, Kristen. I don't know if that helps, or I know you know probably more about it than I do, and I know you're asking that question maybe for the people that are listening too. So thanks for that, though.
No, but that's a great point, Randy, and David here has a good question too. He's actually a staff member and peer leader here. He's asking, so do we eventually go to monitoring drug use and tax all drugs that are made and sold? Lela, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that I'm not sure about that. I know we just passed the legalization of recreational marijuana, and the funding of where it's going to be given is so ambiguous. I actually think that it's very commercialized. I like that term. But it's only going to be administered through the state facilities. The dispensaries that are privately owned are going to be now like moved out. So, which is, it's very interesting the way Montana is going around it. I do think that there will be some monitoring at one point. I'm not sure how that will look, but that might be happening. Definitely taxing everything, because that's what our government's going to want eventually.
Yeah,
that's what we're doing out here in Montana.
No, absolutely, and that's kind of what I wanted to get into a little bit more. Is Montana was one out of 4 states that passed legalization recreationally, along with Arizona, South Dakota, and New Jersey. And I was kind of curious at what that looks like. I know different systems are going to look different everywhere, but I was kind of curious at what that looks like in Montana and what that money might end up going to, because in an example of Oregon, they passed that and now they have so much tax revenue that they can now put into these treatment services that Oregon Bill 110 is going to end up helping. So their taxation of recreational marijuana is now going to benefit getting people into actual treatment. I was wondering if you happen to know any sort of game plan on that.
Most of the money from recreational is going to conservation and veterans, which is
cool.
Interesting. And the treatment is like 0.3, or I think I've seen 0.3, I've seen 0.5 in 2 different literatures, but most of it's going to conservation, public lands, and veterans. So
That's great. I'm not I love the earth and I think veterans deserve more money, but it also seems kind of counterintuitive to take a drug and tax it and then not put it toward drug rehabilitation in some sort of way. Randy, what are your thoughts? Lela, you look like you were about to say something there.
No, that was one of the questions I asked a lot of people, why the treatment options weren't part of this discussion. And I got a lot of blank looks, like why would we do that? Why would we put it in public lands? And because that's what they were leading on to have this legislation passed. They were leading on public lands as to pass recreational marijuana. That was like the default dialogue from people that was coming out. Now treatment, so it was compelling. So why?
Yeah, I I saw John in the comments who start with weed and treat it like alcohol. And I'm just going to reiterate what I said before. We've done such a great job regulating alcohol in this country, right, John? So anyways, I love John. So the money has to go. So we know, and there's no, and if people want to dispute this, I'm not going to. We know when when you make something have easier access, more people are going to use it. And we know that like the percentages of the addiction, 1 in 10 become addicted no matter what, right? So now we're going to increase something and we're going to have more people have access to it. More people are going to be using it. More people become addicted. That's the math. Like and you want to debate that with me, fine. The problem then is if we don't divert enough money, like I think Oregon is doing a great thing. What I am worried about in Oregon, and I'm not the expert, but I don't think they've built the infrastructure well enough to handle, like when you now are reducing, like they say 90% of their arrests are something drug related. So now where's the infrastructure for this huge influx of people that are going to need assessments? Where's the treatment beds? Where they haven't built that infrastructure yet. So I think I see in the front end here some dangers already, or some red flags go up for me, is they just haven't built. Like, I mean, let's talk about the Recovery Advocacy Project, Lela. Like how we've been working on this now. I've been involved over 2 years, and we are still building infrastructure for that, right? And so to get these, leads in all the states and to get town hall meeting, like that shit, that stuff takes time. So I'm worried that Oregon, and then I talk about the money. So like I look at Colorado because they've had it for the longest time. And I just reached out to a really good friend of mine who knows the numbers very well. And I said, what is the total percentage of Colorado's budget that comes in the tax budget from marijuana sales? And he said it's 0.9%. So less than 1% of the entire state budget, money that comes into Colorado is so it's not a lot of money. Like people think there's this big windfall of cash that's going to happen. I'm not sold on that idea yet myself. So.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe my expectations are super high, but I'm like, there's that almost seems like a fraudulent number that's so low. Like I don't know, I'm being skeptical. And just to like move on a teeny bit. So we were talking yesterday with Matt Sutton, who is the media relations guy for the Drug Alliance policy, who really helped get this Oregon bill off of the ground. And when we were going back and forth, he was very knowledgeable and really answered a lot of the questions that he could have. Well, the problem is this is in such a like early stage as to what actually happens with the money, where these treatment centers are coming from, how much is going to this and that. It's all very up in the air. I mean, it sounded like there wouldn't be any sort of like real treatment center hard concrete access until like next October, which was kind of like scary to hear, honestly.
I see John again's commenting. I just gotta say, John,
yeah,
so
please.
Weed is less harmful than most drugs. I would say to who are you talking about? So there's studies that come out that show actually weed for adolescents is more harmful than alcohol. So I'm gonna push back against your statement there, saying that weed is less harmful. It depends who we're talking about and what stage of someone's life we're talking about. So just to throw that out there, John and I have had this like debate back and forth for quite a while. So I'm used to it from the old man. So
I know, and he just came back.
I was going to say something about that. So
yeah, please, Lela.
No, I was going to say I don't think that weed's more harmless than alcohol, but I don't like to put things in that category. I think they're different for every people. Some people can smoke weed and be fine. People can drink alcohol and be fine, or do other substances and be fine. But I just
Yeah, and Jarmichael says, with decriminalization, I'm a firm believer that it will get worse before it gets better, but the long game will certainly outweigh any shortfalls early in the transition. Yeah, and the problem is a lot of people can get real nervous and start looking at the faults and then say another, if it doesn't happen in 4 years and people get pissed off, then they could just shut it down real quick is how.
Yeah, I think you need to wait on the data, what that looks like, and not things that, it's going to be, a lot of it changes overnight. I mean, like if it's not going to be in effect until next October in Oregon, then, definitely have to wait out to see how it plays out.
And I don't want to misquote Matt. He said, so usually the laws will get enacted in February. And so from about February they will be putting different things into place, and they'll actually be kind of like hard actual treatment centers with tax money going to them, hopefully in October. And then I think something else that I read said that California, Vermont, and Washington will be kind of like the next stages of this. Do you guys see this being a domino theory of other states continuing to do this? Do you think this is kind of like really ahead of its time, this bill?
No, I just start. I think it's again, the word I like to use is like pilot program. So Oregon is the pilot program, right?
Sure.
And that like kind of like Colorado was the pilot program for the commercialization of marijuana. Unfortunately, I think Colorado got a lot wrong, and a lot of states now have seen what Colorado got wrong and are making changes accordingly. I can give that to the states that are following. But I think Oregon's the pilot program. So it's going to be the one probably that'll have maybe some more faults. I'm just looking at like the weights. One thing I thought of as a person that's in recovery from cocaine use disorder, like I see the amount you can have is 2 grams. It's like that to me is not even a Friday night. I'm just going to throw it out there. Like I would have an 8-ball or more on me at any given time, anywhere I went. So I'm already over the threshold. And what is that? So what happens to me then, being a person that's probably got 3 to 5 grams on them and not the 2 grams or less, right? So I don't know. I think it's a pilot program, right? So we'll see what happens, what works and what doesn't work. And hopefully some other states, when they do follow, will adjust accordingly. But I think like we've seen with marijuana, it's going to take a while. And we're still getting there, like, right? I don't think any state still got it right. Like maybe we never will get it right. And maybe I shouldn't even be using that word. I don't think any state's done a spectacular job on the commercialization of marijuana either. So,
yeah,
I
more
think
will
the
be revealed.
issue is, one of the issues is we have to be aware of like the demographics of everything. Like Oregon's a very homogeneous state. You know, it's not very diverse. And so we need to play that. I mean, I think just the war on drugs is a different, we have to say like the opioids is like, middle class, white, and that, inner city, crack cocaine is a different demographic. So it just, I think that to me, that plays a little bit in favor of, just relation to how the data will follow up. So.
I just see that Mr. Harris's comment again, and I didn't know. So I'm not an expert on ballot initiative 110. I didn't know that it didn't include any expungements or record, clearing people's records. That's, to me, is very short-sighted. Like, I mean, again, myself with a person with 3 felony convictions that stop me from doing a lot of things every day. And I'm not a BIPOC person. Like I'm a educated white guy that still has problem with a criminal record. I can't imagine what it'd be like. So I did not know that. I think that's a huge problem that Oregon may have misstepped there or didn't take the right steps. I didn't know that.
And that would absolutely be news, because I personally asked Matt that question yesterday. And he said that there aren't any answers to that yet, because that was the first, like John was talking to him a lot. And then that was the first thing I asked is, what about the people in jail now? Like now that this law is passed, when it gets put into effect February, what happens then? And he kind of said, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We're kind of looking in the now a little bit, but if that's true, that is definitely news to us, Mr. Harris. And so Luther J., I don't think I would have ever gone on to use other drugs if weed was not against the law and didn't stay in your system for so long. I also think so Lela, in the grand scheme of things, so kind of switching from the recovery community to actual advocates, does this affect your advocacy efforts? Does this actually kind of solidify the work that you guys have been doing, or is this the goal for a state like Montana, or how does this kind of affect you?
I don't
in your role
Montana
as an advocate.
I don't see Montana ever decriminalizing, like Oregon. I mean, it would be a long time for that to happen in Montana. I mean, the recovery, just getting people to talk about recovery issues in Montana, elected legislators, I mean, I get a lot of blank looks. And for treatment options, I mean, it's not a huge issue. I mean, like of recovery, like they just, I mean, really, Montana would just want to lock everyone up. there's not a lot of treatment options. There's like the big cities have, drug courts, but they're incredibly small, and really hard to get into. It's very challenging out here. I was very surprised that the recreational marijuana actually passed, because it's been on the ballot a couple times. So I think we have a lot of work to do out here, and it's very homogeneous, much more than Oregon. So.
No, I can imagine. I was surprised when that was one of the states that popped up, especially, if I'm honest, before Virginia.
I think it was because the tax stuff led the reason why it's because of funding issue, and the public lands, the way they were just splitting at the funding for public lands, a lot of people bought into that, and as the reason, and they didn't see the long term. I think that was why it was so effective this cycle.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so Randy, John kind of gets into the foray of something that I'm thinking is, I think in the way John thinks in terms of voting purple. I have my personal views that I don't exactly want to throw out there too much, but I am curious as to since he's leading right now, what does a Biden president do for recovery, especially, when he is parading his son out and seeming very supportive of the recovery movement? Does that benefit as much, or do you think that's a bit for show?
Well, no, I think so. I've read Biden actually has a pretty comprehensive plan on how to attack the addiction crisis in this country. And of course, being Mr. Hampton and I are pretty good friends, Ryan's in close with Bill Clinton, who is in close with all of those people. And so I think Biden has a if we can get it done, though. That's one thing is to have a plan. The other thing is to implement the plan and get it done. Yeah, his plan is reliant on increasing taxes. I'm not gonna, let's don't beat around the bush. Like the plan, and a lot of, I think my family pays enough in taxes. I don't want to pay any more taxes. And then, you hear the pushback is, it won't affect you. It's the people that make $4 million a year or more or whatever. And I always say, if you think that doesn't, I'm going to use a Reagan term, if you think that doesn't trickle down to me, you're wrong, because it does, because those people don't want to, that top 1% or 2%, they don't want to give up their money. And if they give up money somewhere, they're going to make it back somewhere else. That's capitalism in this country, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I think Biden does have, I've read his plan. He has a great plan. And, and I'm not a huge fan of Mr. Trump. Like, I'm not going to, I think, like, I wish he would just get rid of his Twitter account and not talk sometimes. No, I'm not going to lie. But when I think about, he has signed legislation, federal legislation that has given more money to attack the opioid crisis or the addiction crisis than any previous president. And I know some will say, well, that was carried over. Some of that was still carried over from Obama, and I get that, right? But he's still like that. We can hate him all we want, but he has given. It's not enough. Like, we need 10 times what they've given us to really effectively address the crisis. But I think, again, if you Google Biden's plan to attack the addiction crisis, it's a good comprehensive plan, but it's also reliant on tax increases, which that's, I think people are sick of paying taxes. I just believe most people in this country, at least the people, I'm a middle class, I'm not rich. Like, I live in a nice home, and my wife and I, we do okay. But I think my family pays enough taxes, period. Like,
yeah, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of taxes. I don't think anyone is, but it's kind of like, what does it do for the greater good a little bit? Lela, I'm kind of just curious about Montana in general when it comes to the recovery community out there. I know when we have Mike Todd come on, he usually talks about how politicians are tough on crime and they hate his harm reduction sites. And I'm just kind of curious what I guess, like, you as an advocate for Montana are mostly pushing for.
I'm just pushing that there are people who are in recovery in Montana. I don't think that people are very, I want to say, out in recovery. In Montana, it's very like hush hush. Just for like the last 3 weeks, maybe a month before election, I wore those stickers, I'm in recovery and I vote. And a lot of people would come up to me and they were like, what does that mean? Or why would you? I got a lot of people who were mad at me, got angry at me for wearing that. I'm like, is it because I'm a person in recovery or that I vote? I'm not really sure why you're angry. But But I mean, people were more aggressively, not in a good way, with that sticker, and it doesn't have any partisan, doesn't have like Biden or Trump or anything like that. But our outgoing attorney general is a very good ally to the recovery community. We really don't have we have some opioid issues out here, but our issue is meth.
Yeah.
And because meth, if you have an opioid addiction, you can get into treatment, easy because of funding issues. But if you go in and say, I have a meth addiction, waiting to get a bed into a treatment center is a long wait.
Yeah.
And I mean, the treatment centers here push Suboxone. Like everyone who's coming out of treatment in Missoula from an opioid is on Suboxone. So it's it's very, all the ads were like meth epidemic. We don't. It's a different issue. I mean, and also alcohol. We lead the country in beer consumption out here.
Wow.
And you can have 3 DUIs. On your 4th DUI, you can get a felony. So you have 3 DUIs, 4th will get a felony. So there's people, I've seen articles that are like 20th DUI, and they're still, they don't have treatment options, or it's a very interesting animal out here compared to out east.
Well, yeah, and that almost seems like something like the opposite of Oregon, where it feels like people aren't. I don't know. Personally, I wouldn't be in recovery if I didn't go to jail. So I'm not saying that like that's the end all be all. Everyone gets to find their way because they go to jail. So punish everyone. But that kind of sounds like something that maybe Montana could use as maybe a little tougher. Because I know my 3rd DUI, I was charged with a felony, but due to my work at McShin, they ended up dropping it to a misdemeanor. Is that like that much of a bad idea?
Well, the problem is that there's a lot of punishment, but not treatment after punishment. So there's like people who just get punishment, and there's nothing after that. So, we have what called pre-releases. So they go from like, our prisons, and then they go to it's still DOC, but it's like live out center. They live in a, facility. It's kind of more like a halfway house, but it's kind of not. And they come to meetings, they go to work, but they have to be in the center. And there's, in every big city in Montana, but they don't do a lot of, counseling or treatment options. They're like, people just, go to pre-release and they go out for a while, and then they're like back into the system. It's, we have a lot of recidivism. So it's, there's not a lot of treatment, long-term treatment, lots of short-term treatment, not a lot of long-term treatment options in Montana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe that. And, I'm just throwing up some comments now about Johnny Fab, always a great supporter, was pretty much just saying, plans mean nothing without an organized movement to hold them accountable in reference to the politicians. And then Chantel here, the organization movements aren't truly advocating against the war on drugs. They're focusing on the opioid epidemic, aka treatment and help for privileged individuals. And of course, John as succinct as possible. Jail works for 1%. Yes, Lela, please.
The thing with treatment in Montana is that we are like, Medicaid only allows, we have a treatment center, Red Rock in Billings, and there's 72 beds, but Medicaid can only fit 12 of those. So there's a lot of beds who are empty because people can't fund getting into treatment. So it is definitely, if you can pay for treatment especially in Montana, or that you have an opiate issue, then you can get funding for it. But if you come in from like, especially for Montana, we have 9 reservations, and the Native American community here is decimated by meth, and there's no treatment options for them. I mean, and they're, and not just meth, but alcohol's more, or maybe equally, but it's kind of left out of our forum. There's no treatment options, and at least in the Native American community, none of them have options. Rare.
Yeah, hopefully the more that we do stuff like this, the more that people will understand the importance of the accessibility of them.
Well, and I just want to if it's okay, I just jump
Of
in for a
course,
second.
please jump in.
So I'm lucky in Minnesota. Like, you know, they call it, the world knows us as the land of 10,000 lakes. I call us the land of 10,000 treatment centers because we have an abundance of treatment here, right? And and it's not hard to get into treatment. I mean, fairly quickly. I mean, and I love two things. One, I love what Chantel said about we have a bigger problem in this country than an opioid epidemic. I know that's the catchphrase right now, and everyone likes to grab onto that. We have an addiction crisis with a lot of epidemics happening. We have an alcohol epidemic, we have a methamphetamine epidemic, we have an opioid epidemic, we have multiple epidemics happening besides the pandemic that's also occurring at the same time, right? So that's one thing. And then John said jail works for 1%. So I just want to, I agree with that and I disagree. So a criminal justice intervention saved my life. I'm not going to ever, I believe, had I not had that intervention, the amount of drugs I was using and putting into my body would have killed me pretty quickly. And I know a lot of my friends that type of intervention saved their life. What didn't save my life is jail. So I do want to back up and say, no, jail did not save my life. The intervention of something coming into my life and stopping me from using drugs for a period of time and then offering me help. I was, it took a while because, there's different systems in play because I got caught with a lot of drugs. So I had federal crimes along with state charges. But eventually I was offered treatment. You can get out of jail and go to treatment. I'm like, what is treatment? I don't care. This is going to let me out of jail. I'll go. And it took a while. I always say it took me 10 months to complete a 60-day program because I didn't really want to get sober. But eventually, if I was there long enough, it started to stick, right? And something worked. And again, I also, what Chantel said, privilege played a huge role in that. I'm not going to lie. I didn't pay a dime for my treatment. It was completely state funded. Medical assistance that we have in Minnesota completely paid for my treatment. I got released from jail, I don't know, 3, 5, 6 times during this case, from relapsing, being sent back and whatever. But that's because I'm also, again, because I have had a good attorney and I'm white and all that stuff. So I totally agree. And I love some of the comments in the box. I just wanted to address that. But again, I think compared to Montana, we have a robust treatment system here in Minnesota. We have a special fund besides Medicaid and private insurance. We have a consolidated treatment fund that if people don't have insurance or they get cut off from that's fine. We'll pay for it's paid for out of our general budget, our general operating budget. So I'm lucky in Minnesota. I always say that I'm super lucky in Minnesota.
Well, and they're pretty close, so I can't see why a state like Maine, for example, has very, very few treatment centers and a recovery community at all. But they have something called Operation Hope, which y'all might be familiar to, but to our audience, essentially, if someone has a substance use, specifically with opiates disorder, they can go to their local, police department, say, I need to get some help, talk to a probation officer, and then they foot the bill to bring them down to the McShin Foundation and places like the McShin Foundation. I can almost guarantee you that at least 1 to 2 people a month are coming from Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, or Massachusetts because of places like that. So I feel like that is a perfect thing that something like Montana and Minnesota could link up to do. I just don't know exactly what that looks like. And maybe that's another opportunity where we can come together instead of kind of figuring out our own different grassroots solutions. It's kind of like, all right, maybe states can figure it out.
Well, I think one of the problems again, Montana's a pretty red state, very conservative. Minnesota, although I think we're a very divided state, I think our metro areas, our big metro hubs, Duluth, the Twin Cities, Rochester, those are very blue. And we always end up voting blue. We have a Democratic governor, more or less than not. We're the only divided legislator in the country. Looks like we're going to continue that. I don't know if anyone flipped this, any other states flip. But I think the difference is the leadership in our state is more liberal. We're a more liberal state than Montana, and I think that's part of it. I'm not bashing conservatives or liberals, but conservative viewpoints traditionally have been lock them up, right? We'll get it out of them. We'll get that addiction out of them by keeping them in jail a long time. That's like old school conservative thinking, where liberals were a lot. I mean, not that liberals didn't have their own problems. I mean, we look at Biden, and he was the author of the crime bill, and that,
crime bill.
Yeah, right. Which, I mean, impacted the, where we're at today with the incarceration problem. So again, we have both sides have problems, but I think conservatives against a lot of them, and Lela said it already, like they're more kind of lock them up type of people than provide them actual help for their disease. So that's just what I see. I don't know.
Yeah, Lela, any thoughts on that?
The other thing is also with Montana, not just treatment options, but we don't have sober living facilities. There's not like we have two. Missoula's it's 80,000 people. It's a big city. There's for Montana. We have two sober living facilities, and both of them are DOC, kind of funded.
Controlled.
I mean, not entirely funded, but they're mostly DOC funded. And one of them is, single mothers who had, can either, have issues, criminal issues, but they don't want to lose their kids, and they can go there. So it's not it's not just because people are not, we've opened a few of them, but they've not been successful. They've, been opened by shady people who want to make money, and then they go by the wayside because they don't last. So that's one of the other issues, at least in Missoula. I mean, there's a couple in Great Falls, but they're equally, they're not as whatever. So that's one of the other issues out here. So
and that's one of the collateral consequences of parity, right? Is that we wanted equal pay to cover substance use disorder like mental health, but then with that comes fraud and greedy people and all that stuff that we don't want. So I mean, that's unfortunately when there's less regulation, and I'm not a fan of bigger government, but when there's less regulation, we're going to end up with more fraudulent operations and more people scamming the system. That's part of the problem. And again, so I could go back to the conservative viewpoint, which they want less government, less regulations, more person controlled, people get choice, those types of things. But with that comes capitalism and greed. So, I mean, and when we have more regulation, more oversight, we can try to minimize those issues of fraud and greed and things like that. Not that we do every time, right? But so anyways, I can see, again, difference between like a predominantly red state and a predominantly blue state, how we have those types of issues. In my opinion, I'm not the guru of all this. That's kind of how I see it. So
sure.
And right now, our current governor is Democratic. He's ran for Senate and he lost, and so we have a huge, we have no Democratic leadership in the statewide races anymore. Our incoming attorney general is like ran on, I'm a prosecutor, I'm gonna 37 increase in crime and just gonna lock it up. So our current attorney general is an ally as best it can be, but it's gonna be interesting how this falls out from our.
Lela, I am curious to kind of circle back to a comment that Christine had. If you could tell us more about the impact of substance use disorder on Indigenous communities up there. I don't know if you know too much specific about it, but I would also be interested a little bit.
I live in Missoula, and the north of us is the wealthiest Indigenous community. There's three different tribes up north, and they have a lot more resources up there. They're a little bit more. It's where the Flathead Lake is, so they have a lot more tourism in that community. But none of the other Indigenous communities, reservations wide, have the infrastructure of that particular nation. So it's the northwest part of Montana is just like there's nothing up there. That's hardest hit. And with the pandemic, it's even worse because they've been in lockdown mostly since March. The communities, each of their communities lock themselves down. So who knows what's going on up there? No one's getting out. So I've heard stories, but they don't get access to treatment. There are no, fellowships meetings there. it's highly problematic. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think
just
go ahead.
Sorry, so that's just almost the opposite here. We have 11 tribes in Minnesota, and almost all of them, except for the Upper and Lower Sioux, are still a little bit older thinking. But most of them now have really moved into a prevention, treatment, harm reduction model with like syringe exchanges and Narcan, and which is traditionally not, the Native community, indigenous people don't buy into that. I think in fact, one of our tribes, and I think it's Red Lake Nation, last week just approved, and their sovereign states approved, they're going to grow their own marijuana for medical use in Minnesota. That's huge. Like, that's, to me, because traditionally the indigenous population or our Native American tribes are very anti, again, more that anti-drug kind of thought, punish people, but they're moving away from that too, because they're in Minnesota. I mean, if you're Native American, you're 6 times more likely to die of an overdose than you are if you're white. So I think they're realizing, like, hey, what we've done doesn't work, and our people are dying at massive rates. And I think
that's amazing.
It is amazing. And so when I hear Lela talk like that, I'm like, wow, that's not what I see in Minnesota around our Native American population.
It's very hard here. And, and actually the most casualties of the virus are on, within our indigenous community in Montana. They are the hardest hit in Montana.
Well, and that's interesting, Randy, to see them kind of like self-govern like that. It is kind of just like have a group conscience, come to a decision, and then act on that decision. I feel like that has to happen through 20 different channels just for it to happen in one state a lot of times. Right. And it's interesting to happen in a community like that.
One of our tribes, the Red Lake Nation, one of the 11 tribes, and they have their own tribal councils, and they make their own laws and their own, they don't abide by, they do have to abide by some federal regulations, and they end up in federal prison when they break whatever laws because it's considered federal. But literally last week, I saw the article, the press release, is Red Lake Nation is going to be growing their own. They're opening their own marijuana. They're doing it themselves for medical use, right? And you have to have a condition that they'll decide what qualifies and blah blah. And I don't know all the details of that yet, but I was just blown away that one of our Native American tribes is doing this, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Like, to me, that they're
that's the only exception.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That nation has been the hardest hit by our pandemic.
Yeah, and Sarah's asking why, pretty much.
Yes, that's exactly why, Sarah.
Can you explain what that is?
They're like multi-generation living communities. They live in a home with multi-generation families. So, and they're small. And so if somebody gets COVID, then they will more than likely all get it. So that's really what's been going on, especially the Crow Nation that John said that have a recovery center. That is the exception. I should have clarified that.
No, that's great. This is why I love the comments coming in is because throughout this entire experience, I'm learning a lot from you, Lela, and Randy, as well as some of the people in our comments. So, Randy, what next is on your plate in Minnesota then?
Well, so actually, I shared it before the thing started. So I'm kind of unfortunately, I've had to put most of my life on hold.
Okay. Yeah.
The genes in my family is horrible. And I'm going to just say it. My sister is in the hospital right now fighting for her life. She suffered multiple strokes recently. She has a blood infection. She won't survive this. We're already talking hospice. My sister is going to die. Is it going to be 6 days, 6 months, or 6 years? We don't know at this point. So I'm her legal guardian. She's 45 years old, and I've had to take on that role of making some really difficult, hard decisions. Well, I promised myself I wouldn't cry.
It's all right, buddy.
But so, I tried so hard. You try so hard as a brother and an older brother, to protect your sister. That's my job, right? One job, protect your little sister. And I feel many times that I failed. No, I'm going to lose my sister to this screwed disease and I can't even say how my addiction took me to some pretty dark places, but I'm going to live for a while, probably. My sister is not. And so what's next in Minnesota? Sorry, I didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole, but I placed most of my responsibilities on hold. Although tonight, I'm one of these people that when I see something cool, I just apply for it, and I should stop doing that because when I do apply, I usually end up getting it. So my local city of Golden Valley, Minnesota, tiny 25,000 people, a small city in Minnesota. We're looking at reforming our policing, how we do policing in just our city, right? And so they are doing this police commission task force. And the applications came out a few months ago, and it's funny. You have to check all these boxes. Like, have you ever been incarcerated or gone to jail? Check. Do you work in the mental health or substance use field? Check. Are you a person that's ever struggled or a family member that struggled? Check. I checked like 7 of the 9 boxes, and I'm like, and then you have to fill out like why you want to do it. And I got accepted tonight. Actually, I got the letter today. Oh. So I'm gonna serve on the city, little tiny town of Golden Valley. I'm gonna serve on our police commission task force to how can we look at policing, how we do it in the city of Golden Valley, and how can we do better. I'm excited. Like, I don't know what it looks like yet. I'm like, I don't know, but like that. So for me, that's something that really is exciting to me and something new. And I can kind of take my brain off of my sister a little bit. So I don't know. That's what's exciting to me. Like, how can we do better policing in just my little city of Golden Valley, right? So that's what's next on the plate for me. So
no, that's really cool to kind of get in there and connect on a very intimate level. And I'll say on behalf of us at the pod and me personally, like my prayers go out to you, Randy. I really appreciate the courage that you show, and the sheer humanity of it all is really beautiful to watch, man. And I appreciate having you on and toughing through it. Like, I love you, buddy.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Lela, before we there it is.
Yeah, there it is.
Lela, before we close out, any other final thoughts or comments or
I am looking forward to our session, even though we are going to do a Recovery Advocacy Day in January for the Montana legislature. I don't know how many people will show up, but we've scheduled it. I don't think they've ever had one before. Actually, I mean, maybe they had one before, they didn't know, but not in recent memory have they had a Recovery Advocacy Day. So that's what I'm working on between now and in January, and just Narcan training around the states, getting more Narcan. There's not a lot of trainings of Narcan, and I mean, not that we have a lot of opioid use out here, but anything helps. I mean, so and just helping with we have a lot of homeless community out around Montana. I know it's cold and stuff, so just help with keeping people warm who are living outside in the cold winter.
Awesome. Wonderful. I really appreciate it. Randy, any other final thoughts, buddy?
No, I just so glad to see my friend Lela. We don't ever get a chance to be together in any way. And I just want to say one thing though. We have this pandemic going on, and I hope everyone is doing their best to stay safe and protect your community and your family and your loved ones. But we don't have to physically distance. I'm sick of the term socially distance. We don't have to socially distance. Tonight, we are not socially distanced. We are physically distant from each other.
There we go.
But we are socially connecting, and we're having a good time doing it. And it's different. It's like I don't get to hug anyone, but you know what? I also would never have an opportunity to see my friend Lela unless we're at some convention in Las Vegas or who knows where, right? So I'm super glad and grateful that I said yes, and thank you for inviting me tonight, Alex and Todd. So thank you guys.
That was very great.
Absolutely, Randy. It's great to have you on again. Lela, it's great to have you on as well. Y'all crushed it. Big shout out to our producer, Todd, and all those watching. Until next time, guys, I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Tired of waiting, lost while I'm sitting at home. Dream of a new destination, lust for something unknown. Oh, you better leave it alone, and I get up and go. How long can I lie around waiting for it? Sometimes you gotta walk out the door. No limits, no ceiling, no crown. No pressure gonna hold me down. No stop until I break every rule. No limits to what I can do. No well, it's too far away. No border gonna stand in my way. No wall that I can't break through. No limits to what I can do.